Okay, cool. I'll make a start. Thank you for having us at the start. It's very exciting. As Chris said, my name is Dan. This is my colleague Ryan. We are both interactive journalists at the Times and the Sunday Times newspaper. A major part of our job is kind of to create data visualizations to go alongside stories, both online and in print. And because of this, we tend to spend quite a lot of time creating maps. So we're going to kind of go through some of the different tools, techniques and methods we have to create maps at the Times, and we're going to kind of give the rationale behind why we use each. When me and Ryan were kind of planning for this talk and going through some examples, it kind of struck us how many different ways we have of creating maps. So as we go through these examples, we're going to kind of give positives and negatives for each technique, as well as an example of what we might use that map for. So Ryan's going to kick us off looking at data wrapper.
At the Times we publish on a edition strategy, so we'll publish at 9 AM, midday, 5 PM and midnight, which is a bit easier than breaking news, but despite all this time and this awareness of how often we're publishing content, you still get requests for quick maps, quick visualizations, things that need to be made kind of at a moment's notice. So we're quite lucky that we use Data Wrapper, which is an online tool for building maps, which we've used for quite a while. It's really handy because we can kind of at a moment's notice build maps at the request of the news desk. So they'll come to us with a story. We'll work on our own projects, but at the same time we'll add value to other reporters' stories. And we use Data Wrapper to do that. So it's a tool in which you input data. It's got our styles already inbuilt, and we can kind of produce really quick core maps, point maps, kind of really quickly. To give you an example, for our local election coverage this year, we used Data Wrapper basically for all of it. So it required no bespoke building of interactive maps. We didn't need to build anything with code. The day before, we sat and we designed how the maps were going to look. Did we have the right shape files for all of the councils that were on offer? How are the colours going to work? How are we going to deal with the fact that Wales aren't, there's no elections in Wales this year, stuff like that. And it was a really simple process, so our Parliament team, our Parley team, were able to sit and enter all of the results into a Google Sheet, and it just kind of happened by. Really, really handy. Is a good example of that, of that working. However, it does mean that people kind of want maps quite quickly, so we'll be sat, say, on the foreign desk, and they'll want a map, and they know that we can build it quite quickly. So we kind of have to be the force that says, is a map warranted in this situation? Do we need a map? So to put this in context, using Data Wrapper, we've built about 8,000 different charts and tools over the last 5 years or so. Only 2% have actually ever been maps. So we're quite determined to not use maps when they're not needed. To give you an example of that, I went through our archive and found this map from an investigation last year. Not particularly useful. So for a start, I don't know why Data Wrapper has a British regions map shapefile, because I don't know why you'd use it. So I went through and looked at this and I thought, how do we make it better? Often at the Times, the best map choice is a bar chart. So I mean, we kind of feel that that's a clearer way of presenting information. Plus I've spelled forced marriage unit correctly on this one, which we didn't do the first time. And people can kind of see the difference between the bars rather than the colours and the shades on the map. So I think it kind of ties into the point that we're not mapping experts and neither are our readers, so we need to make it really, really obvious kind of what we're doing. Make it as simple as possible, the point we're trying to make. So those are quick maps. Those are the advantages and disadvantages. Another disadvantage would be the fact that we might build a really fancy map for our foreign desk of crime in Cape Town, which we did recently. It's required a lot of effort to kind of get it into the place we want it to be. We've made decisions about how the colours work, but then they want us to add a label to it that shows where Table Mountain is, and we just can't do it with Data Wrapper. Luckily, we can add labels. We're very lucky to have a really talented graphics desk as well. So between us, we'll export maps from Data Wrapper. We'll use tools like QGIS and ArcGIS to export maps as PDFs to Illustrator. We'll use a tool called AI to HTML, which I don't know if you'll be aware of. It's a way of building responsive graphics for web. So we'll make a map at multiple sizes, and the tool will make it available for the website. So to give you a couple of examples, these are locator maps for the graphics desk will build. often the main focus of our mapping efforts will just be explaining where you're looking at. So a story on the foreign desk might be quite far-reaching. We're looking at places they might not have heard of. We just need to show exactly where they're looking at. A lot of what we try to do is very simple, but I think readers appreciate that. But that being said, for maps when we don't require any interactivity, we still use the same process. So we'll have static maps that require no kind of user interaction. We kind of hope that the map will do a lot of the heavy lifting, so we can kind of explain throughout what readers should be focused on. So for example, the map on your left is from an investigation about land ownership. So Paul Morgan Bentley, our investigations editor, looked at all of the land owned by a select bunch of tax exiles, basically people who lived away from Britain but still controlled a grand swathe of the country. So we wanted to visualise that, so we did that with a kind of responsive graphic that went in the paper and kind of broke out into sections to show how it worked. But we didn't go beyond kind of where it actually was. Same with RIP. This rivers map on the right, which is a map of pollution. Also used in print, but we kept it quite simple, so we've got a shapefile of all the rivers in the country. We looked at the Environment Agency and how they attributed rivers that are ecologically healthy and unhealthy, and the kind of results were quite shocking and painted a kind of a scary picture of the majority of the country's rivers being really dangerously polluted. And then we did all of these through QGIS, exporting into Illustrator and kind of labeling up, because the most important thing I think is labeling things to make it as clear as possible what the journey is for readers. So those are static maps. We find that readers really, really appreciate when we delve into the archive. So this story on the left is, it was a story about the last 100 years of, the last 100 days of the First World War, and how the battle lines, the front lines shifted. So we went into the archives and found how the Times reported this story back at the time as a contemporary report, and we kind of added our time style to these existing maps, added the blue and yellow lines just to show how that front moved on. But it kind of goes to show, you can see the key in the top left corner, how we did it at the time. We haven't really advanced so much from there. We just didn't use the dotted line. So. And the map on the right is a satellite image showing marshes in Iraq and how that kind of the control of water and environmental protection in Iraq following the Iraq War has kind of caused a lot of degradation of the environment. We used the slider to show that, but the annotations really helped our readers see what they were looking at. So yeah, those are static maps. I think the main point to say would be that keeping things uber simple for readers is our kind of main concern. But there are occasions where we'll go a bit more complicated, which is what Dan's going to explain now.
Yeah, so as Ryan says, they're the kind of static maps that we can create. Kind of depending on the complexity, it can take either we can do that in a day or it can take a couple of days, but there are instances where we want to do more complex interactive maps. So I'm just going to take you through an example we worked on earlier on in the year, and this was for our air pollution campaign that we launched earlier this year. And we basically started with a huge data set. We had 20 metre by 20 metre air pollution data for the whole of London, and we needed a way to visualise that. Obviously, if we tried to load that in on the fly using like a JavaScript library or something, it would take up a lot of time to load something that big. So we actually used Esri, and we loaded in all of the 20 metre by 20 metre points. So each of those points is one of those points, and the colour of it is depending on how bad the air pollution was. And then we loaded this into Esri, and we used an analysis tool called the Kriging tool. And basically, this produced a kind of heat map looking map, as you can see, that kind of merged all of those points, and that gave us a much nicer look and feel. And for this particular story, we were looking at schools in London, so seeing how bad schools are and what their air pollution are. And if you can see in the middle, that little white shape, that's a white shape file of a school in that area, and that just gives you a nice feel of kind of how bad the pollution is around that school. And then the final picture in the slide is how we link that in with our overall interactive, so the reader could pick the school that they were looking at, and it would show them on the map kind of how bad the air pollution was, as well as some other things. So yeah, we've kind of just scratched the surface of stuff like Esri, but it's definitely something we want to use in the future because it allows us to do more complex things. Which brings us on to the next one, which is more ambitious maps. So we actually created this map using D3, which, for those of you who don't know, D3 is a JavaScript library for data visualization. And this map was for a piece by our Redbox editor, Matt Chorley, that was looking at the correlation between areas in the UK that voted leave in the EU referendum and the areas that are most at risk from job automation. So for this, we created a bivariate map in D3, and the bivariate map is a choropleth map that basically shows two variables on it. So on this, we were able to use a color scale to show automation and leave, and we think that was quite effective. And that was a good reason for doing something in D3 because it can add more to the story. We added interactivity so that users could hover on an area and see the percentage leave vote and the percentage that were at risk of job automation. So that was something that we thought was worthwhile. Obviously, it does come with some negatives, the main one being that it can take longer to build, it can take longer to kind of create. And another one that D3 has when you create maps is you're obviously loading in quite a heavy shapefile, which can affect performance. But for this one, we used mapshaper.org, which can reduce the size of the shapefile, so we were able to host it on our site fine. Kind of going off on a tangent from this, one of the things we look at when we create a map, especially bespoke, is our reader comments, so seeing what readers think. Because, like Ryan said at the start, we're trying to create stuff that our readers understand. We don't want to create things that they find too confusing. So I've included a few comments back from readers. The first of which is from Simon Walker, so this is on the Times website. And he says, just because the data indicates a match doesn't make it true. Okay, that's fair. It's not really that specific, so don't really know what we can do with that. So what I've been doing recently is I've been putting the maps that we create onto Reddit, and I'm not sure how many of you use Reddit, but the users on Reddit are savage, shall we say. So this first one, the colours aren't very intuitive in my opinion. Okay, fair, that's fair. There's more. I don't know if we see a colour a little differently, but to me the high leave, high automation is a very nice plum colour. What caught me was the angled key. That's just me being slow though. Nope, it wasn't you being slow. The angle was a bad choice. And that's good for us because even though the comments are pretty savage, it gives us good feedback, and that's what we look for when we do something like this. And there was one more that said, it took me 5 minutes to realise this was England and Wales, which, I mean, I feel like that's quite obvious that's England and Wales, but apparently not. But the overall point is that using something like Reddit, you get a very engaged kind of readership. You get feedback that you wouldn't get from regular readers. And so this is definitely something that we'll be looking at doing again in the future. I think Ryan's going to talk some more about some other user feedback.
It's a good point because Reddit users are entirely different from the Times readers. I mean, this one, for example, was really, really nice to see. Temporarily saying is a bad sign, but this was about our Cape Town map. We did a map of crime in Cape Town. To see, I believe the map gives a better picture than any amount of words is like a real bonus for us. But I mean, it goes to show that Times readers will really, really appreciate a map when it's done correctly. They'll read into it, they'll appreciate it. The problem is that our readers are relatively intelligent. These are taken from a couple of maps where they've kind of pointed out errors. To be fair, I had no idea that, I'm sure the reporter reporters will often tell us what to include in maps and what to look for and how to build things, point us towards sources. I don't think they'll be appreciative of the fact that this map, I mean, I don't really know what that war is, but... and then the map missing out Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan was there, it just wasn't labelled, so they really do need to be kind of, they appreciate the level of detail. So they're intelligent on the focus on the map, but they're intelligent on mapping in general. So this is a recent example. This article didn't have a map included, it was just about Trump and Greenland recently. I think the first line of the piece was like, the Arctic region is huge and Greenland is also huge. So they started talking about map projections and stuff, which is quite unexpected from a reader. We really did appreciate the fact that they are quite map literate. And they can really surprise us. So I think the main thing to take away is that our readers they need a map to make sense. They need to be walked through exactly what it's trying to show. But don't underestimate them because they are quite comprehensive when it comes to understanding the map. So I suppose the point is, they're not mapping experts, and I suppose neither are we. So if you have any feedback on any feedback on anything we've done, any ideas to how we might improve the experience for readers, just let us know, and we'll be open to any questions. Thanks for listening. Any questions? My first hand.
That's really good, thank you. So you, I'm interested in how you get told where a location is. Say someone says we need a map of a random place. How do they actually communicate to you, and how do you verify that location?
Often it will be a case of a reader will be reporting from a certain area, so there might be a correspondent in a certain place. They'll tell us the town they're reporting from, and we'll go on Google Maps and we'll find it. We'll find it that long, and we'll point it out on the map, basically. It's usually not more complicated than that. There's not much. I mean, if we have to verify it, we'd have to rely on the reporter to tell us kind of where they were, where they were reporting from. But yeah, Google Maps is your friend, I think.
Do the reporters ever ask you to kind of like skew the data to make the story?
That is a good question. Not that I'm aware of. They'll definitely want to tell their story. So we do a lot of data reporting where we'll help reporters work with data sets and kind of find a story within them. And to be a desk where the reporters can rely on us to tell them what the interesting things are, what the conclusions are. It relates to our integrity as data reporters to be able to say, actually, you haven't really got a story here. And we will say that to them. They might be keen to show things in a certain way, but we'll be quite honest to do so. I'd say that's the answer, I should say. We don't skew data.
Got a question at the back?
So you mentioned shapefiles, but I don't get too technical. You mentioned shapefiles a few times, but I guess you want to reuse maps again and again and data again and again. So without going into too much detail, how much do you think about reproducibility? And do you just totally rely on one data format or a mixture of them, or how do you go about it?
So if we're doing something that's relatively quick using data wrapper, they actually have a lot of the kind of shapefiles built in, so you can kind of search for a region, or for example in the UK they have like districts, they have like local authorities, postcodes, they have a lot of that built in. If we're doing something more bespoke, like just talking about D3 for example, it can work with a few different shapefiles, a few different formats, so it doesn't have to necessarily be a shapefile, it can be a GeoJSON or anything like that. It kind of depends on what we want to show. Normally, unless we're showing that something quite new, someone out there will have already done it, or you can get it from an official government website or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it just kind of depends on the project. If it's something we need to reproduce quickly and we can't find it quickly, like we'll move on, because like our newspapers, the deadline could be 2 hours time, like you don't know. But yeah, I'd kind of say it depends on the project.
Being a British newspaper as well, you end up making a lot of maps of the UK, so we're quite familiar with that shape.
I'm going to ask a mapping-related question, but you guys obviously have a particular set of skills, maybe not trained cartographers, and you're working in a particular environment, an unusual environment relatively. What does your next job look like?
The next job after the Times?
Yes.
My editors I mean, a lot of
I could rephrase the question to make it slightly less awkward to answer. What skills will you take away to your next job, unless you are a Times lifer?
Big fan of the Times, big fan of the Times. I mean, I've never had any formal training in cartography or anything like that. I don't know if Dan, you've really come across mapping beyond the point of data visualization for news. But we've started looking into things like spatial analysis of things. So for the air pollution project, for example, we were trying to find out the average air pollution for schools. So we had the shapefiles for all the schools provided to us by the Ordnance Survey. And I thought it'd be really, really simple to just count all the dots within the shape and get an average from the air pollution readings. But I had to do it in R, and it was a learning experience for me to be able to kind of work out an average within that shape, and projections came into the mix, and yeah, we do learn a lot on the job. So I suppose, yeah, being able to analyse geodata is not something that I don't think we do much of the times, but with this team, hopefully we'll be able to do it a bit more. And I suppose the rules around building maps and thinking about projections and you know, knowing what you're hiding and what you're showing, it's all stuff we're kind of learning as we go along. And I hope to think that it's a bit better than it once was, maybe without people without these skills. But yeah, that's probably my takeaway.
You haven't answered my first question, but I guess that'll do.
Talked a lot about using mapping to support artificial intelligence producing. Do you ever do it the other way around and discover a story through data and then report it?
I guess the bivariate map was quite a good example of that, because the way we look at it, if we put something onto a map and there's not a geographical trend, there's not really much point in it being a map. Ryan touched on it earlier, how having a bar chart could be better in a lot of instances. But yeah, with the bivariate map, that was a good example of them coming to us, and we put it on the map, and there was a geographical trend, and also the trend that like 48 of the top 50 areas that are at risk of automation were also ones that voted leave. That was an interesting enough story in itself. So yeah, I mean, I guess it for us is, do we see a trend? If not, map's probably not the right one for it.
Thank you very much.